Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Municipal Accommodation Tax Ad-Hoc Committee for February the 17th. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement, followed by a moment of silence, and then a respect and Stratford statement. We acknowledge that Stratford is situated on lands shared between many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples today. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we live and work. Today, we acknowledge the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and neutral Ottawa peoples, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live, work, and play on this land. And next, we have the Respect and Stratford statement. The Corporation of the City of Stratford is committed to providing quality service to all members of the public, council, and our employees. Our goal is to promote a safe, healthy, respectful, inclusive, and positive environment. We have a responsibility to treat people with respect by creating safe and respectful spaces. It is the city's expectation that all present will be respectful. Item 2 is a declaration of pecuniary interest in the General Nature Bureau. Any declarations? Seeing none. Item 3 is the adoption of the minutes. So we have attached the minutes from the last meeting. So last week somebody could approve the adoption of the minutes. Jennifer, thank you. And we don't need to send it. Is that correct? Just trying to remember. Every meeting's there. Okay, no second are necessary. Were there any comments, additions? If not, all in favor of adopting minutes? And that carries. Thank you. Item 4 is an adoption of the addenda to the agenda, and we do have an addendum. And I'll read here that the addendum to the Municipal Accommodation Tax Committee agenda dated February 17th be added to the agenda as printed to include the following. Item 5, items for discussion, 5.1. Under draft use of Municipal Accommodation Tax and Reserve Fund policy. Following the publishing of the agenda, John Hatton, member, provided documents for the consideration of members. First one is the MAP feedback survey results, prepared by John and dated February 11th. And secondly, a document containing thoughts for the draft policy, prepared also by John. So just need a motion to accept that addendum. Awesome. I got to it. If there's no further comments or questions, all in favor? Great, thank you. All right, so item 5, items for discussion. 5.1 is the draft use of the Municipal Accommodation Tax and Reserve Fund policy. So along with this item, we've had a couple of documents prepared by staff. So maybe I'll turn it over to Ms. Kruger to start with. It's maybe a little bit of an overview of the documents that we're looking at.
Sure. Okay, so the draft policy will look familiar to most of you, and not a lot of it has changed since the last time we spoke. We did add some clarifying language in terms of supporting the types of events that we want to support and how we want to emphasize accommodations and overnight accommodations in the use of the funds. And then I ran out of time, so my apologies, but attached to the back of the policy is the criteria, which I will be working on embedding into the policy itself, but it's still in the format of the Niagara-on-the-Lake structure. So there's some terminology and some other sort of updates that will have to come when we do translate that, but I just kind of left it that way so for our discussion purposes. I would also like to point out too that in addition to that, on page 17 of the package, there's an additional, it's a little bit out of order, my apologies, but that's the 2 pages that are inserted there that say evaluation criteria draft for discussion. It's just another example of another sample of ways to evaluate the criteria, whatever that looks like at the end of the day. So it's just it's almost like a different type of a scorecard layout than the Niagara-on-the-Lake. It was just for discussion purposes. I found another one that another city uses. So it's just kind of just there for discussion and whatnot. And yeah, that's about all that's in the package. And we're still looking at, I'll say, landing on specifics within the policy. So again, this is still draft. That's why it's draft version 2. So we can discuss it from there.
Okay. So just for clarification, that the third document that you're referencing is the one that says Stratford Municipal Accommodation Tax Scorecard at the top. So I'm just looking at the right thing. I'm looking at it electronically, so I don't.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. This one that says scorecard at the top, that's just a different format and a different.
Right, so it's the idea is maybe slightly different as well, the criteria you use.
Yeah, well, again, and it can, whatever the criteria is, and like whatever we land on, if we like the Niagara on Lake format of the criteria, we can use this type of a scorecard, or we can use like the more, I'll say, enhanced system. So one of the things I was struggling a little bit with, just to kind of jump right in, is whether or not we have them as a score based on a numerical score, or whether they're based on a high, medium, low, or whether they're based on a pass fail. So there are different ones that will apply to different things. So just kind of going back to our conversation the last time, if we want to not support any activities whatsoever that don't generate an overnight stay, that would be a pass fail. If we want to say, well, maybe we would entertain those, but they're not going to rank as high as the other one, maybe we go high, medium, low for that, right? So it's kind of, there's just a couple ways that we can land on those scoring, but I do apologize, wasn't able to get it as far along as I would have liked in the draft format, so that'll just have to be for our next go around, and I'll try and incorporate anything that we talk about today as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So maybe turning to the draft itself, so the 10 pages. And just having a look quickly, again, it's similar to what we had at the last meeting, but it's a little bit more strategy specific. And there's spots in there that do point directly to overnight stays. So are there any comments, discussion around that, the way that that's laid out? Thoughts? Because that's typically, this is sort of a standard way that the city puts together policies, defining terms, and it's all pretty straightforward, I think. Yeah,
through the chair. And one thing I'll point out on page 6 of the draft policy, there's a couple of things that are highlighted there. So these were things that I've.
Yeah, page 6 or document page. There's like
Document.
3 different numbers in it.
I'm looking at the bottom of the page, so page 6 of the policy. So I'm not sure what that is in the whole. Thanks, Sarah. 12, page 12 of your package. So yeah, on page 12, there's a couple of, I've just used the highlighting tool to play, because these were ones that, examples that were taken from other municipalities that may or may not apply to our sort of threshold. So the first one is, what type of an audience minimum would we want to achieve with a specific event that we might support? Maybe we don't have a number in there, maybe we do, like it was just for conversation. And then the other one was how like generating minimum stays overnight. The challenge becomes, and I think Mr. Hunter hadn't identified, those become difficult to measure. So again, how do we want to structure this so that it's administratively we can have the outcomes measured in the way that we like. So I just wanted to highlight that that's one area where I was expecting a conversation to ensue about that.
Yeah, so the numbers there is an audience minimum of 1,000 in-person attendees, and that would be, we're talking for like an overnight or like a multi-day conference or some event that comes to town. So that's sort of the way we're looking at. So is there a minimum number that we can guess at? Go ahead.
Wouldn't it be a function of how much it costs?
The event, you mean?
Yeah. But when you want to have some kind of return on investment measure that says,
well,
for $100 we get 50 guests, for $1,000 we need to get at least 10,000 guests.
I don't know, it's a committee question, I get.
I'm asking you.
Well, I don't really know how, like, this is the committee's direction. So I'm happy to incorporate whatever recommendations might come out of this, but
And just to be clear, these numbers were pulled from the Niagara.
Oh, for sure.
Example.
no,
Is that right?
some other.
Oh, some other.
Yeah, I don't,
Okay, because I'm just even thinking about like, if we had a conference, for instance, and we were expecting people to stay overnight, 1,000 would be a lot. Like that would be a big conference for Stratford. So, you know, it seems like quite a high number right now. So, you know, I don't think we want to suggest something
so
lower or not have a number at all. Go ahead.
yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like we could reframe this so that we want to encourage in-person attendees and participants, blah, 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 and just leave it more vague than that. It doesn't have to be a number. Again, this is pulled from just for discussion purposes, whether or not we want to structure hours like this or not.
And again, the challenge of being able to measure whether this is like how that's gonna happen or not. And get people to promise things, but whether it happens or not is another question. So what does the committee feel? Do we want to leave the number targets in, or do we want to just round it? Like maybe there's a minimum like 100 or like something much lower, or do we want to scrap the numbers? Us.
Well, it seems like there would, like, the entities like the Destination Stratford or a festival would know what a big event is. Like, I don't know what quantifiably a big event means in numbers, what that is. What's an example of a big event, and then I could look at it and go, yeah, that's big for Stratford. Have any example of that in this room?
If we,
Yeah, it's kind of hard to answer, I guess.
well, and even if we did, what would that tell? Like, how does that shape this? Right, like, because this is really just what types of events do we want to support? So are we saying if only large and small, like what's the
Yeah, I think there are tools through the broader provincial and federal tourism bodies where you can plug things in and it'll spit out like economic impact. I take those with a grain of salt. But I think there maybe are a handful of tools that we can encourage anyone who's applying for these funds to run their event through one of these. So, you know, do I necessarily trust the numbers that are there? Again, I take them with a grain of salt, but over time we will be able to see, okay, these events say that they have an economic impact and the city has $1 million. But we know, having been through this for a few years, that realistically we're looking at $500,000, but that at least gives us sort of an idea of what to do. I think a lot of grant money, especially in the tourism world, you have to come with some of this stuff.
Right.
You may not put an exact number, but there would be, you would have to quantify it in some way. And I think the most important thing in the early days is the reports from that. If they say whether or not we have 50 room nights or not, when they come back, and I would say that whether you're small, if you were, you know, allotting small, minor events, major events, I think both of them need to do a report at the end to quantify as best they can on with exit interviews and things like that of what the impact has. So in 5 years, when we look at this again, we can make those adjustments, or whoever can make those adjustments with the knowledge of what we've experienced in the past few years.
Through the chair, just to clarify, then I think I hear you. I think that's great feedback. So rather than having it be a criteria of qualifying for the funding, that becomes a report back requirement.
A report back, and I think if these And I'm not sure where we landed on the evaluation criteria, and who is doing that, whether it's staff or a group of people. I mean, certainly if someone brings me something, I can very easily tell looking at it what the general impact could be on the community. So I think rather than maybe having the numbers, that it does become part of this criteria, that there's a focus on overnight stays or converting in there, and then that becomes a pass fail or how do you or however we do that. It might not be something when you're a criteria to submit.
Yeah.
But it becomes a piece of the criteria on your evaluation on whether it's worth.
Like after the fact.
Yes,
Yeah, okay. No, that's good feedback. I like that. And I think when we talk about reporting requirements, we can beef that up, that part in that section.
And this, just a reminder, but this is under the category called major events, so, you know, as how we quantify that might be part of this as well. My other thought is there a way to word it instead of putting a number, or maybe it still has a number, but like, you know, aims to generate an audience minimum of 100 people, right? So that, you know, your goal is, because I think for these type of events, not that I'm an event planner, but I am on board of an organization that does try to attract tourists, and you know, there's a break even number, right? So you're running a theater show, you need to sell, you know, 82% of your seats in order to break even, or it's not worth running. So I would imagine organizers would have some kind of number goal of, you know, we need to sell X number of tickets to make this a viable thing.
To that point, shouldn't that be part of our criteria though? Whether it's a break-even number or we assume so much economic impact for each overnight guest, whatever it is. If we have $300,000 to spend, you know, hopefully we have more than $300,000 worth of ideas to support. Shouldn't a return on investment or how low risk versus high risk it is be part of the criteria?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's break-even or return, you say the same thing.
So it's a matter of, do we put specific numbers that they would have to achieve, or do we encourage them towards that and then they have to report back?
Would it make sense to just say that we invest money on the projects that generate the greatest return?
Right. Well, we could say, like, as you're applying, we would like you to demonstrate that this will maybe attract overnight rooms or overnight stays, right? But so rather than requiring a number, just say, as you're applying, you're required to show us the map where you're going to somehow generate the mixes.
You know, I was thinking so much that would be an applicant would do as much as it's weird. Whoever the group is, city staff, council, whatever, is saying we've got these 5 different ideas. How are we going to shape them out? That at least one consideration should be how likely is it that we get our money back?
Right, which means we're trying to estimate the number of overnight stays.
Well, if you say we're going to invest $100,000 on this one versus $10,000 on this one, shouldn't there be different proportionate expectations for?
Yeah, that's how we would define major event versus the other.
That's a typo, sorry. Major events can come out. It was just any event.
Okay.
Like,
then I was like, are we doing?
There's no-
grades?
yeah, no, that's what
Okay.
I'm trying not to do that, so.
Okay.
Cause I think we can accomplish the Niagara on the Lake, I think they have major and minor, and that created a lot of problems because the distinction between the two. So I think if we have the right criteria, we can, link the amount of the investment based on the scoring kind of idea. That's what I was thinking when I did this, but.
I like that. I think it goes to Jennifer's point that in the post-game analysis, you can say, okay, this was the estimate how much it was going to cost, as well as how much it was going to get. And we start to build up some organizational knowledge, how these things perform.
So another thing I noticed, I'm just now trying to find it, but there was somewhere where it said. You had to have run this event already for 2 years. And I don't know if that wording was intended to stay there, and I'm just looking at it now, but that would be another thing, if we're requiring people to say, you have to be coming to us, ask for money for an event we know is gonna be somewhat successful because you have a history, then they would also have numbers. Yeah, I would think, so there may be numbers available, and I guess my question is, what does the committee think of that? Like, is that a good part of this policy to say, you're gonna go apply for this money, you have to have some experience with this event, and that basically prohibits people with a brand new idea from coming forward. So what do you think?
One way to think about it is that becomes a greater and greater weight depending on how expensive it is. Right, for a first time thing, we're gonna spend our whole $300,000 on something that's never been done. Versus a $5,000 experimental thing. So I keep coming back to how much it's gonna cost and what do we think we're gonna get for it. As criteria to say. Are you hiring a new CEO where you wanna see a low pedigree resume? Or are you hiring an entry level clerk where it's give somebody a chance?
So you're thinking weighted rather than saying you have to have this, whatever, have to be in existence for a couple of years.
Yeah. Did arbitrarily say if you're asking for more than $30,000, which is 10% of the budget, if you're asking for more than that, you need to demonstrate proof of concept.
Jennifer?
I think, I mean, there are a fair number of programs for new events. They're not usually, huge in money, but still some of the startups. So in that sense, I would say, yes, I do think there's a sweet spot though. Because I feel like you've been running an event for 5 years and you're still kind of trying to find the money to make it work, then you need to go back to your business plan. Because at that point, an event should be revenue neutral. Whether you're selling advertising or tickets or what have you. But I think there's a sweet spot in there of maybe it's the 2 to 5 year range or something. For the bigger events that we can look at.
And then it may be the case that somebody's running an event and they want to expand it, so they can say.
But that's a bit of a different conversation, I feel, than because I think the way to look at this money too is if it's been running 5 years and it's successful, we probably as accommodators, we probably have our fill of the people that are gonna come and stay overnight. It's taking it in a new direction, or it's expanding it or adding another day, which would increase our business. So I think for me there'd be a little bit of a sweet spot in there.
Raises a really interesting point that there are organizations that specialize in finding innovative experimental things. What if one facet of this had some kind of matching? Because you mentioned the very small budgets, but it's a way that organizations that are out there specializing in evaluating those kinds of things could be a preliminary budget.
I noticed that, and I think it's the role that require matching funds. To benefit to your point, I think that I wouldn't disqualify someone for being experienced. It could be just like a business needing to expand, they get a loan, they could have been in business for 20 years, they want to go do a thing. So it could be also that you don't keep funding it over and over, and you only get once every 5 years to apply or something, but it doesn't matter how long, how much experience you have.
That too.
Right, so back to Herman. Yeah, so based on our discussions, is there a way to sort of capture that where, maybe just a smaller event under a certain budget would be exempt from the criteria of having been around for 2 years. Does that capture in a very simple way what we were talking about?
Well, I mean, you could. What instead, rather than exempting them, you could just still score them.
Oh,
So if you have 0 experience, you get a 1, if you have like 5 years, you get a 10 or whatever.
so have it weighted, but not necessarily in criteria, but you have to
Sure,
wait 2
yeah.
years
Yeah.
running.
I think the whole point is that you're scoring like the lower risk get more money, the higher risk get the lower money. But you're okay giving high risk, okay, you're okay, you know, so that's the way we wanna make sure the scoring bands. It's that we're not giving high risk things at this money.
All time.
Okay, so that's clear?
Yeah, I think so. I think the next, like again, I'll tinker a little bit more with the criteria and the weighting. And the form, like the format of that the criteria takes, and then that way. That might be better, like an easier conversation the next time we do this, like so that we can kind of then run through a scenario of some. Like an application, like a sort of a hypothetical application and how they might fall into this scoring and what. Does that work for you? Okay.
So along those lines too, the other thing I noticed was that there was you have to apply 6 months in advance or 180 days in advance of when your events run. And I was thinking if you've already run the event in 2 years, and it's like you apply in February and it's gonna be in June, you've missed the deadline for that year. So I didn't know if that felt a little restrictive or not, or, you know, I guess for events, we do need to plan pretty far ahead.
Well, I think it just gives the process the time that it needs to evaluate it. I mean, we could instead of doing it that way, you could just have it that the deadline is February 1st every year and be done with it. And that like we do that with the community grants program. It's like a deadline each year or whatever. But again, it's just an example, and we can certainly not change that if it's not.
You create more language that said something like the applications will be considered as they come in and stop to be assigned so that there is no deadline, it's just next opportunity we've got is next August.
Through the chair, the only thing about that is it's extremely onerous for staff and council to have them multiple times throughout the year. So we could end up with one every council meeting if we do it like that, potentially, right? Or so it kind of becomes then a more onerous administration process than picking a date. Like even the 180 days, I don't really love that, to be honest, as staff, but at the same time, like if it's 180 days, then that's at least like 6 months. So that's only going to be twice, like potentially twice a year, or if we could.
Does it have to go through the city?
Yes. It says council's decision and council's policy and council's money to distribute. Yes.
It has to.
100%. Yes.
What was the legal requirement for that?
The Municipal Act.
So you can't have an advisory committee make a recommendation to council.
You could have that, but that's not making the decision. It still has to go to council, it still has to be approved. Oh, sorry.
We're
I'm
talking about the onerous nature of reviewing projects. Why does the city need to give on the onus?
Yes, I guess they don't. I guess that could be an external group, but again, it's just a matter of what the direction of council is and how they would like to administer the program and to what degree they want to have maintained that control internally.
And at every request that common council does generate, like staff paperwork, basically, you know, so if it happens multiple times in the year that, you know, it's red tape, it's down, right? So if you can have it happen once or twice a year and get it all done at once, it seems easier. Maybe once a year as well. All right, are there any other thoughts? Those were some of my thoughts on the existing document, but otherwise, I like the direction of it. So it includes conferences, education tours, product development, visitor services. So it's broad enough but narrow enough to, you know, have people be able to relate it still to overnight stays. So, I mean, if we're good, we can move on with, we'll make some adjustments to it based on our discussion, and then we can have a look at it next meeting.
I just wanted to, you had asked a question, you were wrestling around like. How to whether to pass fail or how to wait. I think waiting is would be my recommendation. I think that's and waiting it towards accommodations makes sense, but like the pass fail criteria, I think it might be too limiting for front yard use and not necessarily we might narrow and get awarded a little bit more than me than so I would wait still.
Thank you for that feedback. I think that through the chair, I think that the intent would not be pass fail for all the criteria necessarily, right? But you could have some, there might be some types of things that we would not ever entertain. That we would want to disqualify an application based upon. So that could be like, say it's like something that doesn't align with council's priorities or something that doesn't align with the human rights code or something that, you know, like is outside the realm of things that the city would support financially. So that would be the only time when I would suggest potentially you want the pass fail in there just to kind of have that out, that automatically certain things are disqualified. But again, like, or say like there could be some things where if they've never look at this, let me see if I can go with it.
We do have what an example in there, if the same project is, they apply to a community grants program, then
Sure.
you need to disqualify them from the match.
Right, I think there was similar language that if you applied for destination Stratford, you
Yeah.
were eliminated from that.
Yeah, so that's a
Simple.
pass and fail criteria.
Yeah, one of these had one of the examples you sent me is that you know, they go award a few times in a row, so you could apply for multiple times in a row, or you could opt in if you were awarded. So I don't know if that's something that we would adopt as well. The reason for that. That guy would just be subsidizing something that isn't supporting itself. That would be one.
Yeah, on that note, would we consider then, like, would it be 1 year, would it be a couple of years of saying, like, you can apply, but by, you know, after the second time you apply, we expect you self-sufficient, or would you want it to just be one, you get one stab at that money and that's it? Because that would be for the purposes of the people planning it. They would need to know, like, they're asking for $30,000, but next year when they run their event, they need to generate that themselves. You know?
And then I just wanted to support John's an example of like if you're getting more than X amount of dollars, then the reporting mandate is this, and it's a little bit more expensive. So that's sort of burden. What that is, like, we should discuss, but like yeah, there should be some sort of a threshold where you know, the size of the donation is requires more reporting.
To the chair, so I can speak with a little bit of authority on this, but after the money's out the door, the reporting may or may not come in the way that you stipulate.
Yeah.
And if we're only funding 1 year at a time anyway, we could be faced with people saying, well, I didn't track that, so sorry, I don't have it, I'm not doing it. Like that, whatever the reporting requirement was. So again, like having some like having an after the fact reporting requirement doesn't carry a lot of teeth. Generally.
It does if they don't, you hold back some of the funding.
Sure.
That's sure. Or you become ineligible if you don't meet the city requirements.
You're right.
You can never apply or your event. I can't start an event, not do the reporting and be like, well, it's John's event now, so he can apply. Like the event and the person are disqualified if they don't. Right.
Okay. So then that goes back to the conversation about whether or not we want to do one-time funding or whether we would entertain multiple like years of an applicant. If they need 30,000 this year, then are we gonna potentially, if they fill out, they tick all the boxes for us, would we give them 30,000 in the other second year as well?
That's what the return is.
Go ahead.
The one-time funding is a little troubling to me because if we find an event that works really well. And everybody's totally happy with it, it's a success, and like, oh, sorry, we can't fund you anymore, I don't think we want something that works, we want to necessarily disqualify them just because we can do it even more next year and have more results and help the community, the collectors.
If you're making an exception, but it has to be an exception, it has to be made for football goals.
I just don't understand what that would achieve. It would just basically, when you're talking about the risky events, they haven't applied before, so let's give this one a try. And it's more just kind of hope that these events are great. Like I think of something like Winterfest that goes on every year, and just trying to think about that case study. If they were to switch that to a full weekend event like it used to be before, it would take a whole lot more as far as organization and the permits and the logistics. But that's going to go on every year. And if they can expand it to 2 days or 3 days or something like that, and it's a smashing success, then they're going to have to retract it next year because they exist specifically on grants and sponsorship.
There's also the Olympics every 2 years, so we can't apply every.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway,
My only concern with that would be who's quantifying whether it's a success.
Mhm.
Because I think if it's not a success in generating more mat money, then it can be a fantastic event, but is it really serving what this very limited money is there to do? So I think if that's something to look at, then we need very clear parameters of what success looks like to this reserve fund.
So that would be reported back to me.
yes, yeah, measuring
Right.
and reporting, which I think was
So another way to get people to report.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe a demonstration of, this was a successful event, plus we're growing it, right? So that continually increasing and not, or greater plans, like not just, now you have to fund me ad nauseum for so many years, right? But it's an actual expansion.
What's kind of cool about what you're saying is, as they grow, and the request will probably ratchet up somewhat in lockstep. The criteria would become more lofty for them to get the next year. Right?
So we could have some criteria like, if this is your second year plan, you need to bring those reporting numbers and then demonstrate why you're still doing
Some upside, yeah.
Yeah, cause I did find that the 1 year might be a little onerous.
Especially if it's something with a significant upfront cost, that then gets, gotta buy a bunch of whatever to set it up.
We could think about like. Just pulling a number out of the air, like 5 years in a row or 3 years in a row and you're done. I don't know. And again, we make policy just based and see how it works. And if we feel like after year 2 or 3, we're like, oh, that's not really fair, we could change it. But just thinking about if you want to put a cap on it or not, or recommend one. Maybe not.
Through the chair, so if there's this is just a question for the committee, but if you had an event that was multi-year, then it's not necessarily that they have to, so you're, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Mr. Hatton, but like, would we want to see increasing returns for multiple years? So in return on investment or somehow, so what does that look like, or how do we measure that at the end of the day? If you then just use the examples that were thrown out, but Winterfest becomes a 2-day event. So then that's great. So year 2 or 3, we're in this, or the second year they apply. How can they grow it beyond that? Like, or how does it become, if it's a weekend event, it's not gonna become a 3-day or 4-day event, likely. I guess it's possible, but, so how do, like, what does the increasing return look like? Or how do we gauge that or assess that?
What I do would be to think about each subsequent year as an option, as opposed to a firm commitment, it's an option. If you deliver what you say in the first year, you're there for the second. If you don't, we're not. The second year hurdle depends on what you're asking for. If it's the $10,000 entry level, that requires X number of guests and Y number of overnight stays and this much direct spend for the economy. If next year you say we want to double it, because we have this hot tub exhibit, it's gonna be part of Winter Fest. Okay, show me the business case, that's gonna grow.
So would that mean then the bid, like, again, just thinking about that as a hypothetical, but does that just mean that it will pull in more people? Does that just, like, how is that measurable? Or what does that, I'm just asking, because I'm trying to envision implementing something like that.
The question of how that measurable and what are we going after is central to conversation.
Okay. So again, like back to the criteria and the scorecards and how we're gonna evaluate it, what does that look like?
In terms of the scorecard, then, you know, if you had a multi-year application, you have to apply each time, so you have to make your way through the scorecard, but then would there be a few additional criteria of like, you know, 10% more overnight stays, or I don't know,
Yeah, maybe that.
or like if you're asking for 10% more money, then
Yeah.
demonstrate 10% more.
Yeah,
Overnight
I just think it should just be based on the amount that they're asking. I don't know. I think we're overcomplicating and I think be more and more stuff every time. It might be an organization that just had 100 members, they're only gonna ever have 100 members, should be fine. So I just looked at Guelph as an example where 50% of the funds are after common court. And you get disqualified from future ones if you go over.
It seems pretty good incentive to report.
Yeah.
So for organizations that are just starting out or that don't know yet exactly how this is gonna go for themselves, that's gonna be punitive to them potentially. And that's what the committee is.
I don't think so, because if you're asking for, in essence, tax money, whatever, I feel like there is a responsibility. I don't think for a $5,000 grant, it can be just a bunch of tips and like a form that we put together that you just, if you're talking about $100,000, then I want to see some graphs. I want to see some fancy. I want to see an actual report. But I don't think because a lot of people who would be kind of reluctant to do reporting are looking for smaller grants. So let's make it easy for them. The people that are asking for big money, I mean, they're the ones that are also writing grants, federal grants and provincial grants. So this wouldn't be any shock to them to have to be held accountable for the money that they're.
And I think the small person still gets their money back. Oh, we're asking for some work. We're not saying you have to hit the hurdles you outlined. It's just there's still in the blank.
Through the chair, so that's good feedback, and I think like maybe we just make it then almost like a 2-tiered step. So if you're applying for less than whatever the number we decide on, 25,000, 30,000, whatever, then you just have to meet these. You have to be like, we're going to evaluate you on these 10 criteria. If you're applying for more than that, then you're going to be subject to these other 10 on top of that. Is that like? So for the lower ones, like, are we still trying to structure the criteria for based on overnight stays, even for the $5,000 ones, right?
So just the stringency of it is low.
So the weighting, you mean?
In my opinion, what you do is you say if you're asking for less than $25,000, you have to score at least 65%. if you're asking for $100,000, you have to score at least 85%. If we're gonna use the graduated scale that was talked about. It's like managing capital projects, right? In a corporate fund, and where you invest in the things that generate the greatest shareholder return.
Right, that makes sense. So it would be then kind of steered towards, not a, we're, I don't know if we're gonna call it big project, small project, but like 2 streams. Like, so, well, one, I guess, going one direction, but 2 different sizes, so different criteria need to be met, or additional criteria need to be met for additional. Is that-
I think that's probably the easier to administer, is just kind of have it be almost like a continuous. So you have like the first 10 criteria, you have to meet those if you're the small one. And if you're the larger one, then you there might be a secondary criteria of the first thing. Like, so say the first under 25,000 you have to generate, you might get a score for overnight stay 1 through 5, but if you're greater than that, then you're like, it's a mandatory requirement. Like it's a pass, maybe that's a pass fail thing, where if they're not generating that, then it's not up for discussion. I don't know, it's just kind of a.
But what's the objection you have to, you add up, you have to go through all these questions anyhow, you just add up what's their score.
No, I have no objections to that, that's fine.
And if you score less than 60, I'm making those numbers. If you score less than an A+, you can get big bucks.
Yeah, that works, I think that works, and so then you're not having a 2-tier system,
Right.
but you're setting the bar at a different level.
I think it's a great way to talk about the
Yeah.
smaller budgets as being more experimental.
Yeah.
It's like our studio theater, that goes to the big thing,
Yeah.
right? We try more eclectic things.
If those experiments have to achieve a goal.
Yeah.
So if it's small, you're gonna have 25-person really kind of concentrated event. Then that has to be part of it, like, well, I don't know, you have no idea, like, then you're not.
Why should we do it?
And let's work together then.
Mhm.
Make this better.
Here's 3 other similar events that we've sponsored that are similar size. How do these metrics feel to you?
Okay, so I think that we drifted a little bit over towards the criteria, so there were 2 examples that Carmen gave, like one was more. The Niagara on the Lake one was definitely more in depth, whereas the other example was a little bit more scorecard, adding points sort of thing. So I don't know if there's ideas on which one looks like a good springboard to jump off from.
I like the Niagara on the Lake one because it is more robust, and then, but rather than having it based on weighting, like high, medium, low, or like some 1 to 5 or whatever, is as a sign of points for each of those things. So then you can say like, if it's like, then and I'll have to sort of see how it falls out when I start to play with the numbers, but like which ones are more important than others would get more points. And then maybe that's the conversation for our next get together, where we can kind of fine tune it.
Right, because there are, I'm just trying to see how many criteria there are. Like,
Are you using the thing that put on page 30? That's the one we should be looking at. Yeah, page 30.
No, the 20 pages before that.
I'm looking at the one that says Stratford Municipal Accommodation tax scorecard,
Yeah, not that one.
not that.
No.
the other one, I think it's the 12 criteria.
It's Niagara, that
Area page number.
page,
That's
pages.
PDF page numbers.
Yes, please.
Are you electronic or?
I'm not sure.
You have that? 'Cause I have them as separate files. The PDF.
Yeah, 19, page 19 to 29 is the Niagara on the Lake
Yeah.
structure, and then the one after that, page 30 was just another example of format.
So the Niagara on the Lake one, I think, up to 12 criteria possibly in there, and then there were some criteria under main criteria, so. Clear benefit of tourism, aligned with existing city plans. Other expected benefits, realistic cost evaluation, ownership, alignment with other initiatives. Street work, realistic timeline, benefits, synergies, risk assessment, ownership.
So
They
yeah,
all sound good, right? Is there anything there that you don't want? As part of our criteria, I guess, or is there anything that's missing?
through the chair, just because this was a snipped from the Niagara on the Lake, it does not include the criteria for overnight stays in that attachment. It's part of policy, and so I'll build that into the, like, when I get the format cleaned up, I'll be able to build that in, so then becomes a, like, if that's worth, for example, say the overnight stay is worth 10 points or whatever, then some, like one of those like a $5,000 event might get 0 or 1 because they may not be getting that overnight stay, or they might be not sure, so they get a lower score. Whereas if we have like the Winterfest where we know it's kind of a more of a standard thing, then they may score higher because that's already getting that. Does that make sense to continue with that approach? Or
And I would say that the very first criteria, clear benefit to tourism, they do say in their particular emphasis on overnight accommodations. They sort of are leading in that direction already.
right.
I would just point out, it's a little disturbing to me that they weight that as medium. When I think it has to be high, and in part it has to be high because the bylaw, the city has, the agreement with the city has with Destination Stratford says that retained by the city for the sole purpose of supporting tourism through the city and administering that. So I think that has to be high if we're actually looking at this.
But that, it says tourism, not overnight stays, says, I just said. Verify there is like slightly.
No, but this, sorry, on page 21, benefit to tourism,
Got
they only have that weighted as medium.
it.
That has to be really a priority because the bylaw says.
I think that's the city mission. So, yeah.
Yeah, at the very top, so like I said, page 19, very first one says clear benefits to tourism. And then it says benefits to one or more sectors of tourism with a particular emphasis on overnight accommodation. That is a passive or fail and one. So
Oh yeah, that's weird then they have the next one is, it's a little bit redundant.
yeah, it's a little different.
Through the chair, the reason why this is a little bit clunky is because I was cutting and pasting and wasn't able to properly change it into the format that we were. So this is how Niagara's was worded for like minor and major streams. I've kind of been parsing them together, so it's not pretty and it doesn't flow the way that it will, but I'm so good at it. Yeah. So like, I think I appreciate the discussion, and I mean, if we're gonna go to a like a difference, like a system that's not like a pass fail and not mandatory or whatever, that we're gonna just based on a scoring system, then that I think that discussion kind of goes away, and we just assign them a number
Right.
for each of those things.
So the number for overnight stays might be a bigger number.
Right.
Compared to the
Yeah,
rest.
bigger, or have a bigger range to it, like 10 instead of like 2.
Right.
Like, so you would, it's not like if you gave it a weighting of 2, you either get a 0, a 1, or a 2, but if you give it a weighting of 10, you can have like that range of scoring. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so unless anybody has other like particular requests, then maybe we'll leave it with you, Carmen, to
Yep, for sure. Yeah.
be more ready to facing and polish stuff.
And
Okay.
like, Carmen, I would say that like the only place that a pass fail might be important is the legal stuff. For just pointing out, so I would say if it's a legal thing requiring that pass fail, but if it's a scorecard thing, that's the way to. That's.
Okay, so I'm not sure how that applies then to the bylaw with Destination Stratford, because that's a separate organization governed by their bylaw, so that I'm not sure if that applies in that case.
Oh.
I'm just asking if the gender, I don't maybe misunderstood. You're referencing to that bylaw.
Oh, that's the agreement the city has with Destination
So
Stratford.
that their mandate is to be 100% focused on whatever.
No, it says the city money will be used.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
That's
okay,
not the,
Yeah.
the city is paying for their percent.
yes, yeah, okay.
So that would be a pass fail.
You're right.
So if I want
Yeah,
to,
because all of the map examples you sent out, there's no products without computer tours, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, I can definitely make like if it doesn't fit within our current bylaw, that it's a fail, like that.
Yeah,
Cause that's not even a part of the criteria.
Yeah, I know.
That's like, I would
Yeah.
say you're
Right.
qualified.
It's for the person that's applying.
That's true. Yeah, you're
Right up front though, to say like, don't bother applying.
Exactly.
Don't meet this like basic criteria, this is a tourism grant, you need to show.
Yeah, that's good. Thank
The
you.
job description and those would be application where they submit.
Yeah, so that should be right off the top, like, we don't want them to waste their time filling out a whole thing and then they get to the criteria at the bottom and they're like, oh, I don't know, well. So like some of those qualification things, I think should probably just be part of the written.
Yeah, I can have those as part of the scope or part of the initial areas of like
I
the.
think that's also where your kind of ethical or philosophical filter might apply. I don't know quite what you had in mind for that, but just not aligned with city strategy, but being able to call out what that means.
Yeah, cause some of those things we're. Like we're saying, it has to be aligned with the. Tourism strategy we have, basically, it has to be tourism related, but it also has to kind of align. So, yeah, would be a weighting to that as well.
I was thinking of it's an extreme political organization. You wouldn't feel comfortable, I'm saying,
Right.
or.
Yeah, it would have to align with the values of the city for sure.
And that's where I think the pass fail suggestion was really good, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just on that though, like if it's part of the core policy, maybe we don't need to score it at all.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
That, so it becomes kind of moot, it becomes kind of moot that it's not a. So we're only, the criteria that we're scoring is really only the merits of the application. Thank you, I'm struggling for that word. Thank you.
So we're trying to keep people from applying, and it's still irrelevant, right? Like you're trying to do a political rally here or whatever, like that, you don't even bother starting this application. It's not, yeah. Okay. So I think we have some homework, anything for Carmen. And then we'll check it after you've done. So. And then, so John, we had those documents for you, which actually I kind of think, well, it's also sort of in the 5.2, which is consultation and engagement activities, because you did actually engage with innkeepers to get some feedback.
Yeah.
So maybe it sort of melts into that, but if you wanna speak to that,
It is a good thing.
did everyone get a chance to see what John said there?
Quick. So the genesis of this was at the last meeting, I kept harping on the idea of strategy. And I left feeling like I hadn't done a good job of conveying what I had in mind. And I also wanted to check to see what the, kind of the call it temperature check, what the sentiment among the accommodators are as a group. And so I sent out this questionnaire saying, here's what I want. You guys agree or disagree to what I state? And so there were 9 statements that we asked people to respond to. Invitations went out to the 75 or so email addresses of licensed accommodators that I was able to track down. Jennifer also forwarded it to the innkeeper group, which overlapped quite a bit. I think we caught up some extra people there. I'm happy to share more methodology, et cetera, with it, but I was very clear in saying this is not a city survey, this is just me asking for feedback. So we got about 35 responses back, so 45% response rate, so there's pretty good motivation in the group to respond. In terms of agreement with those 9 statements, the lowest level of agreement was 89%, and the highest level of agreement was 100%. So there's pretty good alignment, not just participation, but pretty good alignment, not universal or unanimous, but 90 to 100% is pretty strong. So what I wanted to do is just share here the themes of the statements that I shared, that I put out there for evaluation. And as one amateur reading the draft, where I think there's maybe some mismatch. Would that be okay to do? Sure. Great. Any comments on stuff so far? Okay, so the 5 key ideas that emerge from these statements. One is the sandbox is already on. The world in which we are trying to create a map strategy is already penciled between the map regulations and then the agreement with destination Stratford. The city is already committed to what that 50% is going to be. I think that is missing right now in the agreement is an explicit statement that this is what we do, because when we get into the details, there's all kinds of exceptions along. So I don't think it's really a commitment if there are loopholes to get around. So I'll dive into that a little bit more. But I think the sandbox is the point. I don't think that there is as much weighting and visibility to the idea of overnight visits as there should be. There is mention of it, but there's one example in one of the scorecards, and I couldn't really tell which one we were supposed to be looking at. But in one of the scorecards, overnight visits got 5 points out of 100. And I know that's not what we're recommending, but that was the kind of lukewarm attention that it felt like overnight visits were getting, in my opinion. More measuring, this is why I was bringing up the idea of investment, looking at a project and saying how much of our map dollars does it take and how much are we going to get back, because I think one of the key mandates, one of the key strategies is that we spend MAT to make more MAT. And I didn't see that very clearly articulated, but it is a hot button with accommodators. Building our shoulders was another area where there was unanimous agreement, and that was defined as adjacent to peak season. Because I saw winter mentioned in one of the drafts. There's a lot of drafts floating around. I think we need to be really cautious around winter and using any of our funds in winter. And that could be a separate discussion, but defining shoulder and what our game time is, I think is really important. And then finally, I think there's a big miss in terms of when this ad hoc committee wraps up. The process that I understand it is the project and the disposition of MAT funds is entirely run by city staff and council. There is no further stakeholder involvement, leadership, or championship. And I think that's a huge miss. And I'd like to suggest that there be a standing advisory committee, similar in makeup, not necessarily these people, but similar in makeup, to have representation from key stakeholder groups. That group is responsible for making the recommendation to council. I think it brings a different set of perspectives. And I heard in so many different meetings that city staff is overburdened. It seemed like illogical to pile more stuff on. So I think there's an opportunity for the tourism experts to help influence the guidance. In terms of the gaps that I found, that I was concerned about, I don't think there are black and white spending boundaries outlined in the stuff, because there are murky references in different places to spending on community infrastructure, spending for the benefit of residents, and the most egregious example was spending on non-tourism related projects as allowed by the council. So my concern is, how can you say it's only for tourism and then say unless council says otherwise? It's a snake eating its own tail, because either it's this that's just a rule, or else it's just a slush fund of the city. The references are in the supporting documents if you care to see it. I don't think that visitors, and in particular overnight visitors, are given the spotlight sufficiently in the draft as it stands. There are too many other variables that come into play about we even consider having a non-tourism project come under consideration is a sign to me that we haven't set up the filters properly. That should be an automatic route, it's not tourism. And you have to work pretty hard to get money if it's not overnight tourism. Because I think to your point, 2 flavors of tourism. There's not enough financial transparency and accountability. We ask project members to say, here's how much I think I'm gonna get, and then after 2 months, here's how much I did get. I didn't see the same onus put on the city to say, here's how much Matt we collected in aggregate, here's line by line how much we spent per project, here are the ones that made us money, here are the losers. That should be part of the annual or quarterly assessment. The advisory committee, I think, is central, and the reason I think it's central now is because it's not an advisory committee to define the things that we're arguing, discussing, right? We shouldn't be coming up with a scorecard. The standing advisory, she said, here are the criteria that we want to use. I think our job is to say, here's the general themes that we think are important. Advisory committee go off and work on it, come back to council with your scorecard, your process for soliciting proposals, evaluating them, measuring their success, inviting them to return. It's all standing committee, advisory committee, but not city staff. And I'm concerned that setting this up to have an ad hoc committee meet 3 times, share some ideas while we're already drafting measurement criteria. Ultimately, for a system that city staff is going to pick the ideas and council is going to vote on them, it does not seem like any different from where we've been. And there's no industry overview to make sure that it doesn't become, you know, the sanitary sewers up on the north end of town where we can get stuff. There is no boundary to stop that from happening. I think that's. And about 90% of my peers agree. So I'm happy to answer questions, dive into any topic or statement you think I've made that's inaccurate or disagree.
I'm gonna ask maybe first, anybody have a comment, maybe, or? Cause I have a few, but I'm the chair. Also, like, go first. Yeah, so just some thoughts, maybe I'll start, go backwards, sort of I think the idea of a standing committee, it can be proposed to council certainly, and I think it could be maybe separated from the other work we do, so we can make a recommendation of a policy, which is what we're working on, like draft policy criteria and all of that. I do think that's the work of this committee. And we may need more than 3 meetings to do it, I don't know. I would say present that as like, here's the policy that we're recommending structure. And we'll also make this recommendation to have a continuing ad hoc meeting. I would separate the 2 just because that way, you know, council can look because they are sort of different things. So that would be my one.
Would that allow the advisory committee to change the policy?
Again, the advisory committee would make recommendations. Okay. So and then staff would, based on those recommendations, make the changes, and then council would look at it and say, hey. So in the end, I guess council's representing the city, the taxpayer, to say yes or no. In the end, but just to say the way that the community grants is done, we have councilors and staff sit on that, and anybody else? No, it's council and staff, so it's a mix of representatives. So I would think that maybe the recommendation of staff would probably be the same, but maybe that could include a couple of people from outside citizens. But the way it's typically done is that people who are in council are representing people. So then you talk to us, who would be sitting on that committee, should then You know, make your wishes known, and I mean, it's democracy in one way, but it's also, again, having red tape and right, so that there's those extra filters. And I would say, you know, as far as the emphasizing overnight stays, I think we've got that message pretty loud and clear, so I think the next draft we may see, like, especially when it comes to the criteria, that we'll see an emphasis towards that. The non-tourism related projects, I don't even think that, like you were saying, legislatively, I don't think we can call it that. However, like, I mean, I don't think we can say, yeah, we're gonna do something that's completely non-tourist related. I agree. I don't think that should be in there. But maybe what it means is that there's certain things, like for instance, the housing, right? So affordable housing. You could make an argument that in order for us to have a tourism industry here, we need to have people who work in the tourism industry and can afford to live here and not drive for someone else. And, you know, they need to have, you know, a living wage. So there are, you know, you may say, well, affordable housing is not tourism related. Well, it kind of is. So in some ways, but you know, that's the argument. You could try to. So I'm saying that, like, there really isn't anything that should go through the map that's completely non-tourism. Right, there should always be an argument that it relates back to tourism.
The example you just used.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Through the chair, so yeah, like, I think what you were sort of getting at, Councillor Verback, is the fact that anything can be tourism related. Refurbishing a road, well, the tourists need the road to get here, like there's all, like, the way that the legislation reads is it's vague and it's loose on purpose to give municipalities that room to decide what that looks like. Our policy is going to be a lot more focused in not necessarily excluding those projects, but making them almost impossible to score in if they were to be evaluated. So that's, I think that non-tourism related projects piece is still it's still an item that council could elect to do something with MAT funds that is not tourism related.
But
that's their prerogative as an elected body. There's nothing they can set policies, they can override policies, they can change policies, they can do all those things. So
Within the provincial legislature.
sure, yeah.
the intent of the legislation is clear, that it's for tourism. The city's own language in the agreement with Destination Stratford says the city's portion will be spent on tourism. All the court cases have all these fancy formulas and strategic filters for evaporation and fences and everything else. Having language in here that says non-tourism is perfectly okay is not perfectly okay. There should be an explicit statement that this is for direct tourism only.
I'm not familiar with where that is in the thing, but I'll find
Yeah,
out.
that's the other thing I hadn't pulled that out with that
For sure.
agreement, so like to have a look at it, because it doesn't make any sense to me actually to have that language in there. So I don't know why it would be in there, because you could, like I was saying, you could argue anything's tourism related, so you don't even need to have something that says non-tourism related, because
Then let's
it's in anyway, so I don't understand the reference of it or how that exactly is what the stage is for that and how it's worded. So that is well, but I do think, like, my opinion is that this policy absolutely, if we're looking to generate overnight stays, that it's absolutely tourist focused, right? So it'd be much harder to make an argument about, you know, fixing a road and somehow argue that it's gonna generate overnight stays, right? That doesn't, there's no direct link to that. Did you find it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Through the chair. So the reference to that non-tourism related purpose is to provide examples of what will not be funded.
Right.
And it gives explicit examples of public works road maintenance repairs and like facility repairs and, you know, salaries and benefits. Like, Like, so anything that if an applicant comes to us and applies for anything that relates to those types of examples,
They're not.
they're not
qualified.
eligible.
So when we say non-tourist,
And
they're
unless-
ineligible.
Unless allowed by council, is the way that paragraph ends.
Sure.
So that's what I'm saying, that non-tourism expenses is okay as long as the council says it's okay.
Okay, so we can remove that reference to by council, that's easy done, but I will still say that council could still choose not to follow that.
Well,
It's a policy.
giving them a free card in
Fair enough,
the right
fair
is different than asking.
Yeah,
them to
you're
pay
right.
the full.
You're right.
And in general, I would say, like the discussions that we've had at council, there does seem to be definitely an appetite to use this map money for tourism.
But
So,
there's
yeah.
always temptation, right? There's always the homeless,
Yeah.
this issue, if one has housing. There's
Yeah,
always
and that's
temptation.
when we don't have a policy, that's what has happened already. So this is the whole point of the policy, is that we want just to have a mindset to steer this money towards that direction, as was sort of the
The
overarching
intention,
intention.
And all I'm suggesting is let's take out the loopholes that accomplish exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I was also back, like, yeah, I agree, sandbox is already defined, yeah. Target visitors, yeah, we're gonna do that. I don't know, Carmen, what do you think about number 3, getting more than our payback? So are we gonna mention anything in the draft policy about, you know, that we would like to see this particular grant program generate more mat? Like, is it worth putting in there as a?
Yeah, sure, like we can add that to the focus or the scope, the purpose and scope areas for sure, like that's the ultimate intent, and then facilitate that through the scorecard.
Yeah.
Again, whether, how we measure it, that's still like a little murky from my brain, but you know, we can certainly stipulate that that's an objective.
And then the shoulder season thing, that, you know, Destination Stratford is definitely focused on shoulder season, but winter in this particular, so could we have some wording in our
Yeah.
policy as well?
Yeah.
To again, weight
I-
things to shoulder season.
But I think if you ask 5 people in different segments of this economy what the shoulder season is, particularly those people, they would say peak season is June and July. Which is not grass. So if you
No,
don't get
it
across
is.
that,
What's
Yeah.
the dates on?
yeah, exactly.
On specific.
Do we wanna put dates on it?
Yeah,
Could do
focusing on March 15th to June 15th.
So, excuse me, through the chair, to clarify, so March 15th to June 15th is our core season, yes?
That's our shoulder season.
That's short.
Oh, March to June, sorry, okay, yeah, and then July and August is the core.
No, our
No,
August.
August and September.
See, this is.
Like, I'm asking for clarification
I think
because
that's
it's,
fabulous.
so.
I think,
But I think we're using terms here that we haven't agreed on definition.
So when's the next then, so we, like for the fall. Slash winter, what's
So
like the end of the-
I think now that we're getting the data from the mat, it's very clear. I mean, frankly, even in August, a lot of people could use midweek, but the reality is, if we're looking blanket months. Any other month but August and September, because even successful properties are looking, we're still under provincial averages for occupancy in July. We're still, I mean, 65% if you're lucky. So I think now on the flip side, I am looking at whether I'm gonna open for January next year because the winter was so bad. So and other properties aren't even open. So I think the way to look at this is you start to fill when, as John says, what do you say, open but not full or whatever?
That's the criteria, I think.
And then you work, once you get those up to 70%, 80% capacity, then we start to look at moving it in, because that also means that in terms of us generating the mat, there are more of us open to accept the conference patrons, because you don't want to have a conference of 1,000 people in January. There just aren't the rooms in the town. So you kind of start with I'd be absolutely fine if we restricted it the first couple of years to May, June, and July. And that's it, that
As
was
the shoulder,
I
but
think
not on the other end of the shoulder, like October, November.
October is a very busy month.
Could we weight it to, like, say, you know, you get so many points, if it's in this part of the calendar year, you get 0 points, if it's in this.
Yeah, October in 2024, because that's the latest I have for math stuff, is almost 72% capacity. July is 66. June is 59. So I think, especially with, for instance, if you're looking at this year, but when you've got strong shows that are running through October, October is one of the months that you can kind of, once the word builds, but it's springtime, frankly. That I think a lot of us would say that's where we need the help.
But I think this is a great example of where this shouldn't be part of the policy that's being defined here. It should be defined and built and managed by the standing advisory committee.
I think we can put it in right now to our criteria, go ahead, Brian.
But you're gonna have people argue, rightfully so, that, well, gee, my April is really soft, we should include April, and they're gonna be there.
Well, I think a weighted sort of system would be good, because if you don't wanna target August and September, then you get 0 points. If you target July, then you get 9 points or 10. Go ahead.
That's the strategy of the weighting would work too, but we could also just tie it to the data that we have. So that it becomes like, so say like it's not necessarily by month, but it's based on the statistical data that we have through the MAT reporting. So if we know that we have 72% occupancy in October, then that gets the 1 point. Because we're already kind of at a nice threshold, but if we're at, you know, a January event, maybe we want to make that also like low because no one's open, but focus on those, like you said, like June, July, and then maybe it's November or something. Like we want to kind of build around those. So pick the top, say 3 months, and then put a month or 2 on either side of that and define it that way. We could do it that way based on, and then to have it subject to updating as we get more data and as we get, like, you know, more accommodators online with reporting and remitting, and that then our data will become a little bit more robust as well.
I love the parameter of it's a weighted schedule that a standing committee puts the weighting on and can change as data drives.
Based on the data.
Yeah, I don't think that this is something we have to decide. I think the strategy, philosophical point of we want weighting of these events by seasonality, really let another group figure out what that weighting is.
Okay, we've got that weighting in shoulder season. Maybe define a little bit. Stewardship and transparency, I think that's probably gonna come back to reporting once we have this grant program going. Then staff will need to report back out to council for sure about what projects were, and you know, typically at budget time we get. But yeah, we will get a reporting on the, you know, this happened last year, this is how much we spent. You know, with the community grants, we get reports back, with our advisory committees, we get reports back on like, you gave money, what did you do with it? So, you know, there will be, because we didn't have this policy yet. There was no reporting back because it was just, we spent MAT wherever we wanted. So now we're gonna have a bit more structure, there will be, they will come with MAT.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think part of that should be not just council, but all the people who collect MAT on behalf of so.
I think, yeah, public information.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
why not send it through?
Perfect.
Yeah.
So currently it's already posted on our website, so we would continue that practice to tell the public exactly what was funded in the past few years. It's been 1, maybe 2 projects, but potentially with this new system, it might be 20 projects that are listed with the amounts, and that's like, I think that would be a very reasonable expectation from this group and what we would expect.
Sorry, can I just put back a question and then I had another comment? is there, just so we're all clear, is there any money that's been promised at this point that hasn't been paid out? Or is everything that's been promised so far, are we current?
Through the chair, so there was monies approved in the 2026 budget that have not been flowed yet. Sorry, I'm not prepared for that question.
General, like,
I think that the destination Stratford lights on event was part of the mayor's budget.
is that the $150 transfer?
I think that's the.
I think that's the only one.
Yeah, we talked about other,
Yeah.
but then we were like, no, we're developing
Yeah.
policies, so we're not going to. Cross.
So,
And that,
so there was 360, I think, in the reserve, so that means really we're talking about, there's 210. Currently?
I think we took that into account when we gave the figures out to this committee. I think we told you what was available
Okay.
based on what we knew.
Okay, so one of the things I think when whoever's doing the recommending of projects brings it to council, I really think, and I alluded to this last time, I really think there's a disconnect between this money and understanding how hard we work to put every dollar in that account. So it was mentioned, say $5,000, a $5,000 grant means. Sorry?
hundreds of thousands.
Is, so $5,000 is, it takes us $125,000 in revenue to replace that money. Which at a $250 average room night, that's 500 room nights. We need to sell to generate $5,000 in that revenue. So what I would ask is, however this happens, when it is brought to council, that kind of information is reiterated. So every councillor isn't just like, it blows my mind that we keep giving away $150,000 and nobody seems to recognize how hard it is for us to generate the revenue to replace that money. So I think there's this disconnect that has to stop, or that money's gonna be gone again, and we have to replace it.
Just building on that, if you don't run events that reload Matt is gonna peter out.
It is already petering out, like I don't have the 2025 numbers. Between 2023 and 2024, occupancy is down. That's a problem. And if I see the 2025 numbers and I see occupancy is down again, what are we doing? Right? Because the whole idea in other communities, and Stratford didn't do this to the same degree, but in other communities, it is sold to tourism as this is going to help you. This is going to do wonders for you. And if 3 years in, we're heading in the wrong direction, then I mean, obviously we're not spending money very well.
Let's say, unless somebody tries to argue, but imagine how much worse off you'd be if we weren't doing all this Matt stuff. The point is, there's no metrics on any of the spending. And there's no ownership and somebody saying, here's how we're gonna spend it, here's what we're gonna get, oops, we didn't get that much, that's what we're asking.
Well, sure, I think that in part of our reporting discussion around this policy when it comes forward with council, I'll make a point of mentioning some of the things that that Jennifer's brought up, you know, about the generation of that tax. It's interesting though to me, like when I talk to people, like I was talking to some friends and I was like, I'm on this MAT committee and they're like, what is MAT? Like, so, you know, the understanding of what it is and so it's just, I don't think people have the thing of like, oh yay, free tax, whatever. But then I mentioned to them, like, you know, the tax that you paid when you went to Toronto and you had your bill, actually I just paid for upcoming trip to Toronto, and I think it's 10% now.
Well,
In Toronto. But anyway, like, so that they would be able to relate, and they're like, yeah, but that's, as a tourist, you think about it one way. as a resident, you maybe aren't thinking about it quite as much. Anyway, sorry, Carmen, you had something.
No, I think, I just to Jennifer's point, I think that's an easy statistic or metric to include in reporting that comes out. It's very straightforward math, using your example, like $250 a night, like that's a really easy.
And it's a great way to
Yeah.
emphasize the importance of the policy focusing on overnight stays. I think it's.
And
That doesn't even account, the mat thing is really interesting because you can extrapolate from that to how much accommodation revenue there was.
that's
It's not nearly as easy to say what are the other economic benefits that accrue from an overnight visit. And that's why one of the things that we really hammered and is just, it's so critical to the group that I'm talking for. An overnight guest doesn't just benefit accommodators, it benefits so many other stakeholders by definition. Right, so having people come and look at lights and then go home doesn't do much for the economy compared to having somebody come in March or April, stay overnight, dine, they go get their nails done, they go shop at a gallery, whatever they do. There needs to be recognition, not just how much work it takes to get that mat back, but how much superior an overnight guest is for the economy. Because that doesn't seem to resonate, and that should be a central plank of how the city spends its mat funds, is recognizing the incredible value of an overnight guest compared to anything else. And I don't think our friends across the street do a great job of that at all.
There's been some conversation with council about that for sure, like it is part of the conversation, but certainly an emphasis when we come to talk about this policy is really important. So go ahead.
Just further to my earlier comment about the easy math, like, I mean, if you're talking just even in an annual reporting back to council, $300,000 of mat collected is $7.5 million worth of like hotel values, right? And then if you want to divide that by $250 average night, whatever, you can come up with that. But I think adding that context is a very easy piece of information to include that you're right, might help.
So we also have ways to, there must be some sort of formulation used to say that therefore generates this much economic activity.
Right.
And I think that's some of those numbers, there's a formula you plug in to figure out what you're generating in the economy as a whole.
Do you know what is the discussion around those metrics for Destination Stratford?
No.
Which metrics?
Return on investment, how much traffic did they drive, how much mat did they build?
I don't know about that, but we do get like how many visits were made and then an extrapolation from there. This is the economic impact of that. Yeah, we do get numbers like that.
It might be worthwhile setting up some healthy comparison between the way an industry-led group runs the tourism fund compared to a grant to a tourist organization. I think the results will be different, and that's why I worry if the solicitation of ideas, evaluation, and then measurement of ideas is all done by city staff. What happens if it's not working very well?
Then reevaluate it. Did you have?
That's not accountability for results.
Well, I mean, there has to be KPI, right? Like, so if it's not achieving results, then we need to look at policy.
So where is
Policy's
that?
not working well, then.
Where is that looking at the results? If it's not meeting the KPIs, where is that in this policy?
In this policy,
Yeah.
we can build in KPIs, I suppose, I don't know.
Don't you think that's?
Well, and see, it comes back to the criteria that we're putting forward is one of the weighted criteria will be overnight stays. So once this policy gets moving, then we can have some KPIs around that too, but it's hard to know without. And it's kind of like with the big events, it's trying to stab at how many people come, we don't really know yet exactly.
Absolutely.
The generation, so but
It's a new game.
once we know those, we can actually put in KPIs, like this is a realistic objective. That next year, this grant money should generate more than we did the year before, right? X% more, or however we want to say it.
What I keep coming back to is what we should go back and present to council are broad themes. There should be a scorecard that emphasizes tourism and local and state. There should be recognition of seasonality. There should be a set of KPIs. There should be all these parameters. And now we want to go form a group to go fill in the blanks of what those parameters are. I don't know why we are deciding if overnight stays get 5 points or 10 points, as opposed to just saying they're critically important. Let a group of experts define what that is.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe we can either do that now, I think that was the intention of this ad hoc committee, was to get those bits done. Like for the policy, so that it's a full policy when it's presented to council, that we have a good structure and then we say, okay, like I understand this. It makes sense, and then we can go ahead with it, so I kind of think. You know, if it's really vague, it's not best for council, it's hard to argue. Right, so I think we do need some of those criteria and stuff defined. And then, like, nothing in a policy is ever set in stone, so if it's not working, and if we see, oh, well, it's actually going the wrong direction, we can bring it back.
How easy or hard is it to change a policy?
I would say, I don't know, I think it would be dependent on the staff time, it's a lot of the challenge, right?
So the short answer is hard.
No,
I don't think it's
Short
hard.
answer is.
I think it depends, like if you wanted us to kind of go policy overall, yeah, it takes some. This is a new policy where we hopefully would have measurements. Were you guys? So I mean, where the way we're moving forward, we've gone through some of this feedback that you've brought from the first group, and we're gonna incorporate some of that into the next draft that comes forward. So I think that leads me to the next topic, which is consultation and engagement.
But I just asked for what the feedback from my colleagues is here on this point, in particular, the idea of taking this from city staff and creating a more permanent advisory body to manage and champion the net spending to bring recos to council.
Any thoughts?
I have a really hard time with not having a committee that includes the people that are responsible for generating this tax money. I think this is different. You can say, well, a councillor represents taxpayers. This is different. There's no other industry in this community that is responsible for generating specific tax. We all generate HST and all of that stuff, but this is a very specific tax. And the idea that there's no input, this is a prickly subject, because when this was first enacted, there was supposed to be consultation. COVID happened, most of us were not consulted, and then it was rammed through. So the idea that this money that we are currently now generating would have no input from us on a regular basis is a very bitter pill, I think, for a lot of us to swallow. So I would also want a balanced committee. I think this is perfect, where there's a weighted input by the industry that's responsible for the mat, and then there are others in tourism industry, tourism adjacent, that have an input. Do I think a restaurateur should have as much input as an innkeeper? No, I don't. If they start having to generate their own tax, they're welcome to have it. But we already carry this burden. So, and I think, for myself, I don't believe the money's been well spent yet. So.
Sorry, just as the chair, I was just notified by the clerk, it's not okay to send it back and forth.
I told you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so
Thank you.
I would be absolutely in favor, and also understanding that does take a burden off of city staff. I think it has a level of expertise on it, and history in terms of running events and performance measures, that I think that input is very important to have. So
Any thoughts from the other two members?
I think about this more from the corporate experience and organizational behavior. Hearing the overburdened staff, they work very hard. And say, here's something else. It just seems like they're not using some of the people who are really passionate about it and very central to the execution of it and benefit from it. And like overnight stays rises all ships, as John has mentioned. So anyway, to ignore that intellectual property and passion and ability to connect that part of the organization with councillors, I think is kind of missing the boat a little bit. How you do that, well, it's not an easy thing to put together a permanent committee that advises, but I think it's worth it.
That's my turn.
Yeah.
I think speaking from the seat that is like the community person, I think it makes sense for there to be experts who are stakeholders. I would want to make sure that so that wasn't seen as making sure that it's balanced. I would make sure that it would no more than 50% of the group was from that thing. It just from the community perspective of seeing this money being spent really fairly and without any sense of like insider kind of stuff happening. I think having a balance would be important. But I also I do think that the money would be guided really wisely by having some some regularity of input from places. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. So I think the way forward, because this is an ad hoc committee and we know we have a limited scope, but we have the ability to make recommendations to council. So I do think that we create policy and finish with that work. Have that as one recommendation and have an ongoing committee as a second recommendation. I think it's important to separate the two. And then it's up to you to convince council to that's the way to go, because I can't make that decision here.
Yeah, and
But
why do you
I
think,
would definitely say if you want to make a recommendation.
why do you think that they should be separate?
Just because I want this policy to go ahead so we can start. And in using this program, like I think we have enough information to go on to make policy.
I disagree pretty strongly, and the reason is, I'm concerned that once the policy is cast, it's going to be very, very difficult to make any changes to it. So I think the two things should go together. I think rather than trying to present a draft policy, we should present a draft strategic plan that says these are the mandatories that should be in the policy. And here's a committee, the recommendation for a committee to fill in the blanks. I think that we are jumping to filling in scorecards and evaluating high risk versus low risk events before we all agree and have written in clear, straightforward language. That is for tourism, overnight stays are secret, the 5 or 10 tenants that we all are lining up for. It's all a shouting right now with different and contradictory pieces to it.
Okay. Yeah.
So through the chair, I just wanted to clarify for the committee. So council has struck this ad hoc committee with a specific mandate outlined in your terms of reference, which is to develop a policy. If this committee as a whole does not feel like it can meet that mandate, then the simple direction would be to tell council, we can't do this. And then ultimately be up to council to decide how they want to move that forward. So I think, again, there's a lot of conversation about whether to do a policy or not. Your mandate is to draft a policy. And we do have a limited amount of time. So again, I just want to put that out. It may be better to kind of make that decision now. Can you fill the mandate or not?
Can you tell me what the definition of a policy is?
The policy.
You said
as
that there's a
outlined-
mandate to create policy.
Yeah, to policy to guide how the city of Stratford is to
Define
use. Again, we've given you several examples.
That's not a
So
definition.
through the chair, I don't feel like arguing, it's not my intent, it's not my job to argue with advisory committee members. So again, there's been specific direction in terms of reference.
Yes, we're creating policy as directed by us. So council asked for policy to be created and then staff started making it, and then we came back and said, no, we'd like to have a committee so that people can have it. So this is how we got here. So yeah, we do have a job. So, but if we would like that job to be extended into, you know, refining the policy or, you know, enacting the policy, that's a separate request to council. But yeah, if we want to make policy that's you're going to recommend this committee and to say this is the policy that we think is a good start, then that's, you know, we'll continue, we'll get a draft back from Carmen and we'll continue with down the road. And I do feel like we've heard a lot of the requests you've made. So like the strategic direction, we're gonna put as much of that as we understand into the policy itself, so that hopefully that will satisfy the strategic direction that this is. And that I think is very valuable because we wouldn't have had that without this committee.
Would it be reasonable to say that the cover sheet for the policy, so I don't know exactly how you define policy, but the cover sheet for the policy is these are the strategic mandates.
Okay, we talked about adding that to sort of the preamble and the direction, right? Like we talked about, you know, targeting overnight stays, and so, you know, a lot of those things we've kind of talked about and we're going to incorporate into the policy. Again, you know, it's a policy, my understanding of it is it's a guiding set of principles that that council's going to use to decide how to spend.
Right.
That's possible.
But
So that, and you know, it would be great, I think, to have it be as specific as possible. Right, whereas we're like, this is a great program that we can have, we based it on other programs that we've customized it for Stratford. And we wanna go ahead with it, otherwise we're gonna be sitting with money in our reserve fund and not spending it, so.
which might be better than misspending.
But I don't think that the approach that we're taking is spending.
Me neither.
So,
I'm not sure why that's it.
yeah, so we're gonna, if we submit a draft policy and we think it's gonna take us in the right direction, then great. That's the whole point.
Can I just ask so if we all come up with agreement of a draft policy and it goes to council, can council turn around and change anything?
Sure, absolutely.
So this all might be for naught, if they go through and they're like, no, we want this all to go for infrastructure.
Yeah.
Through the chair, that I think given the previous discussions that have happened before now and what the expectations are based on the terms of reference, that's highly unlikely. This council, I think, is very much looking for a framework that will help guide them and satisfy not just themselves, but the accommodators themselves that are been vocal. No, we can say that, just vocal about and have strong views on how this should look. Okay, so again, we're trying to and my role in this is trying to balance that passion and those objectives with the corporate city objectives and making sure that we've kind of accommodated everything. It's not gonna work 100% of the time in favor of the specifics that the accommodator group might want. It's not going to work 100% in favor of what the corporate structure would want. Hopefully something in between that's livable for everybody to apply this framework to everybody or anybody to apply this framework to potential investments in our community. So I think that's sort of how I see it working. Can it be revised later? Sure. But if it's something where we're sort of wordsmithing a specific criteria or something like that, that to me, that's something that we can tinker with as a like as an like a feedback or an afterthought, once this has had an opportunity to work or not work, to see whether or not that 5% or 10% scoring makes any difference, or would it have resulted in different outcomes or whatnot, right? Like, so it's kind of, to me, that's sort of a, let's measure this or look at it after the fact.
And I would add to that too, that from a council perspective, if we wanted to spend this money on roads or housing, we would have already done it. They would, so the fact that we advocated for a policy, some of us advocated for a policy and, you know, took time to get feedback and stuff, like that's already, you know, an indication that council's open to whatever this draft is gonna be. So I would hope that they would have a look at it and be like, looks good. I don't know that, I can't guarantee anything. But I certainly, as the chair of this committee, bring back whatever we put together and advocate to my colleagues that this, I think this is the way we need to go. And this, you know, we took time, we had in-depth discussions, and you know, this is, you know, hopefully I would feel very confident that it's a good way forward. So that's just for my.
I think you put your finger on it, though, that as a group of stakeholders who collect the maps, you know, you were very polite in saying vocal. There are a bunch of pissed off people. And I won't speak for anybody else, but the reason they're pissed off is because it seems like a shell game. Where, you know, we collect the map money, we have to do it, it's jammed down our throats, we have to present to the guest why this has suddenly been imposed on. There's an ad hoc committee formed to have input, and we're arguing over very minute tactical details without a really dramatic, provocative statement that this is what this policy is meant to accomplish. And without that, you're gonna have at least 34, if not more, accommodators more pissed off that you asked for an opinion and really didn't take it to heart or blew it off, not you specific.
Right. Well, I would hope that, you know, based on all the feedback and what we've talked about so far, we do have a strategic direction for the policy, and it's not, it hasn't gone into a void. It's like we, you know, coming into here, you know, I didn't know we would focus on overnight stays, but clearly that's a priority in this. And it will be made clear in the policy that it's a priority, so I think your input is being taken.
Yeah.
And
Which is great.
and we're gonna bring back a draft that hopefully will reflect it, and you'll feel comfortable that that's reflected. So that's the objective. But actually now, speaking of like innkeepers, but also sort of more the broader public, one thing we're gonna talk about is consultation and engagement. So we will get back a draft policy. So the next step, which we asked for, was to have some consultation with, you know, specific people. And we talked last time about, you know, we can make a survey, we can then filter, we can ask people, you know, before you fill out the survey, you know, are you one of these criteria, so that we can weight those answers, right? With people that are in the industry, people who are tourism related, and just general public, and maybe even people from outside. So that's sort of the next step.
Sorry, would that, for clarity, would that happen before it goes to council, or it would go to council then? Okay.
I would think it should happen for this council to say, okay, we've got this is the draft, this is the direction we're thinking of going.
Here's
What do you think? Right?
who's on point for creating the survey and administering it?
Probably Karen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you do this formally, but I would like to make it a requirement that the survey come to this group for feedback before it gets distributed.
Yeah,
I think we've got some different opinions, and I think we need to think really carefully about what database of respondents we're using.
So, because you've already sent a survey out, and so we've got a taste now.
I've sent out a piece gathering input from one stakeholder.
Yeah, I'm just curious about, so the questions that you asked. Are you interested in seeing those similar type of questions,
Absolutely.
but for a broader audience?
Absolutely.
To fill,
And
like,
there's probably more.
so. Right, so we could take a look at some of those questions, like, again, the sample that we had last time from the survey, it was definitely questions that were leading in a certain way. Your survey also has, you
They're all
know, this is, yeah, they're all leading, John feels like this, you agree or not. Which is,
That was what the comment was.
you said it yourself, so there's like,
This is
that is what it is.
in my opinion, what do you think?
So maybe what we could ask staff to do is like, you know, if we have. We can take a look at some of your questions, incorporate them, we can. What else do we need to know from the public? But I think it would be pretty general of like. You know. Here's the policy preamble. Which will state the strategic direction and so on.
Great.
And then get feedback. Like it's, do you think in general we're going in the direction? Like so those type of sort of overarching,
I think that's fabulous.
not necessarily about all the nitty-gritty criteria,
I
or
would
just to
just
say,
the scorecard.
yeah, not the scorecard, not the whatever, like maybe we can have available. But I think the questions should then be more like what you were talking about, strategic direction on that, and that, you know, that builds a stronger case for council as well, to say that, you know, people that this focus and, you know, we're in agreement with it. Or they hate it and don't say yes to it, but then, you know, if we got feedback that something's really off, we could make adjustments to the draft.
Right.
So that's the intention.
Feel free to use the questions and tweak them however you want to make them feel more objective, because I don't think you're gonna say. What as bluntly as I literally did in the survey, these are my opinions.
Yeah.
But I would like us to have a chance to look at how the things that evolved and also get that.
Might be helpful to test what we think the weight should be on different things, like without showing what our thought is on how weighted it should be. You could probably pass some of those categories, that makes sense, and like what are the top 3 most important things on each criteria.
Right.
And then figure out, okay, what we think should be weighted the highest, what are the as well. I think that.
Like a ranking of like.
Yeah, a ranking
what you're
or some
talking
sort of the criteria that we're talking about could be really valuable for us.
about.
Through the chair, so our survey tool has limitations. In how and what we can collect in terms of data and how and what types of questions we can, types of questions that we can ask. So, I'm just trying to figure out, like, certainly we could build questions like, for example, these are our 10 criteria, like, or these are the committee's top 3 criteria. What do you like? Would you agree or disagree with this? Like that kind of, like that's gonna be the limitations with the tools that we have.
Does it have to be that?
Yes. It
Why
does.
does it have to be
The city
that?
policy is such that our engagement tools are using our corporate tools.
Yeah. You get
So how do you-
Stratford.
And that's a council directive too, so.
So you're going to get potentially flawed data because we're wedded to a certain database.
No, not wedded to a certain database, we're wedded to certain types of structure. So for example, we couldn't ask people to rank 25 things. The software tool does not allow for 25 input criteria. Or we wouldn't be able to necessarily provide different weighting for questions. Like we can ask 10 questions or we can ask 20 questions, but we can't say question 3 is worth more than question 10. Like it's got limited, yeah, so there'd be potentially some interpretation of the data that we have to get back.
There may be like, for instance, like if you wanted to, we listed the top 10 criteria. But we would have to ask people to type in, like, what are your top 3? And hope that they will actually type it, rather than being able to like, and how we get response, we'd be like, okay, just type in. You know, or you could even say like type in number 1, 3, and 7, rather than say. So there are limitations, but we can still collect the data. Depending how we frame the question.
Just build it for the system. I got that part. My concern was more about who is in the database, who you're gonna be asking.
There's no database. It would be open to the public through our Engage Stratford website and through the social media channels that we have and other, however this committee decides we want to solicit that feedback.
Yeah, so you could send it out to all of your lists. So what we were talking about last time too is that the very first question is, you know, how are you,
What group are you?
how do you stand in relation to that? Are you, you know, concerned citizen, are you a tourist, are you a concerned citizen, are you in the tourism industry, are you a business that's adjacent, like we can ask for those, like, are you an accommodator? So we can whittle down.
Yep.
And we should be able to
Segment.
then separate those
Segment.
responses.
Manually,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sorry, at the last meeting you had said that there was a list of subscribers who you reach out to and there was no way to.
There are subscribers.
Yeah, so there is a database.
Through the chair, so anybody can subscribe to the list. But that's not where the survey would go. It would be open to anybody, whether they're on the list or not.
Yeah, be advertised, but you could sign up.
You can get notifications saying there's a new thing to do on Engage Stratford, which people will get if they're subscribed, and if they're not subscribed, then we would have to find them other ways.
Where I was going with this is, wouldn't it be better to say, can we get the list of the BIA members? We know who we want to get opinions from.
We sure can send it to the general manager of the BIA and ask, like, please, we want feedback from this, please send it out in your newsletter, and this is the thing. So yeah, for sure.
That's where I was going in terms of who's in this, because if it's the database, and maybe it's not misunderstood, where 95% of them are residents that are in the tourism business, we're gonna get kind of skewed result. Even if you do the segmenting, you're not gonna have the sample size to say restaurateurs feel this, whereas accommodators feel that.
I think we can target it for sure, like BIA, you know, BIA even has its own, you know, Facebook, WhatsApp channel, and there are different ways that they reach out to people. That wouldn't necessarily be public facing, they've got their communication channels inside, so we would definitely want more responses from people who have a stake in this conversation time, I would think. Yeah, anything more to add?
Just that yes and no. I mean, we also want to hear from the people who are not accommodators or who don't have a stake, to make sure that what this committee is coming up with and the recommendations to council are representative or potentially representative of the objective. So is this policy going to meet the objectives of the city as a whole, or the council's strategic priorities as a whole?
And that's where I come back to that sandbox has already been defined. So I'm not sure why we're asking people who can't change the sandbox.
Well, we're asking people, how do you,
Play.
what do you think about within this sandbox? We're making a policy about this part of it.
Good.
So we're narrowing it down. We're not asking them about, do you agree with the policy? Do you agree with the sandbox? Sandbox is there. But we're saying, like, we want to section off and make a sandcastle over here, and we want you to comment on it.
And
I bring it up just so we don't put something on the list.
Right.
It's clearly outside the
Yeah.
sandbox.
Exactly.
agreed, through the chair, I see where you're going with this, so we would not be asking, do you think that the match should be spent on roads? That would not be, like, we would be staying away from that specifically and focusing on where this discussion has already taken us.
Should it be one small event? Should it be big blockbuster? I think that's great to ask people. But
And it's
do you think we
important
should
not to-
work on affordable housing? I don't think that should be.
No, that wouldn't be the objective or the
And
intent.
then, you know, like for perspective, like that this amount of tax and our road budget is like less than a point of a percent, right? Like it's too small to fix like Wexford Road.
But it's not something.
It's small, so you know, we wouldn't want to recommend something that's like, this is like, we can solve all the potholes from scratch, you know, costs a little more than 300 does.
7.
Okay, so we're gonna come back with the draft survey, is that gonna come along with this, does that give you enough time to? put together for our next meeting.
When is our next meeting?
When is our next meeting? That is the next thing on the agenda. I don't know if we set a date last time, the next meeting.
Yeah.
I think we left it open.
There was in the
Here it
agenda.
says March 16th.
Or
Or.
I missed the order.
Oh, cause that's the third.
No, it's just we're only having a 3 meeting end, so the next one's the next one.
And if we don't finish what we need to do, we might have to. But
Is that something you decide at the next, or ask for at the next meeting? Cause it has to be approved by council, is that, am I remembering that right?
if we want to.
So we would decide on asking at the next meeting.
To request the extension.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to do the March 16th if possible, that's very great for us.
Oh, yeah, it's March break for,
Can I ask others here, do you think this meeting's basically over? We have another 2 hour block of time. I don't know how much progress we can make and the materials that come back. Do we realistically think that the third meeting is gonna be sufficient? And if not, I don't think so. If not, should we be asking for that the additional sessions now? What's the mechanism to do that?
does it make sense to do that? To, like, if, cause I'm doubtful. But is there any advantage or any reason why we would
Wait,
proactively ask?
So through the chair, my recommendation would be to wait till after the next meeting, that way you'll have a better sense of where you are in the process. And then when we make the recommendation to council, you could ask, we'd like to have it for another 3 meetings or 3 months, or you have just a bit more information to provide to council as part of that. Oh, and through the chair, sorry, we can do a quick turnaround and put that request before council, so it doesn't slow the process significantly. We do have meetings every 2 weeks, my apologies.
good.
I was just gonna say, back to your question then, is that achievable then? If we're leaning towards the second meeting, then I would say yes. The only thing is that, so in terms of revising the policy and getting that in place, the only thing I'm not sure about is the engagement piece and the survey piece. And I'm looked to the clerk a little bit on this one, but how, like, whether we, how we orchestrate or how we gather the feedback from this committee outside of it, or can be outside of a meeting.
So the chair, we can't gather that feedback outside of the meeting, but we can look and see what other options are available.
Okay.
So does that mean that we're not allowed to send in here some ideas for the survey?
No.
We're not allowed to do.
Well, maybe not as a group, can they
Sorry,
send
no,
suggestions to staff
Yes,
to say?
sorry, yeah, it's just not to the committee, you can't send.
Not to like these folks, so maybe like.
Yeah, sorry.
I've got 30 years of marketing research, I would like to help, but if it's like, no, you have to sit there in silence, like, okay.
I think if staff doesn't mind, then feedback.
I'm available, that would be helpful.
So the next meeting then would be the draft policy and a draft survey. So so not necessarily having sent the survey out, but then we would hope that at the next meeting, we can finalize both of those things. So that maybe there's only another meeting after that to follow up and, you know, talk about results of the survey and whether we need to adjust anything. Does that make sense? So like possibly another meeting after the next one.
Sounds like the advice is to wait to see where we are next week.
So timing wise. More times than that, what do you think, like the Monday after the 23rd, or is it a problem to do it on the same day as the council?
Through the chair to request an extension or?
To do the next meeting,
Oh, so
if we can't do it on the 16th. There was a request to move it.
There are 2 options in the agenda, I don't know if they were discussed to them, the March 16th or April 20th.
Oh, wait, okay.
That's quite long.
It's a long time.
if the committee would like to look at an alternative date for the next meeting, we could definitely be flexible on that.
So the 23rd or 30th of March.
I would recommend the 30th.
That's for me.
30th.
Everybody, ready for March.
I will be. So I can provide all the information, but I will not give it. From the 23rd to the 2nd. But I can certainly have the policy there and then. For discussion or whatever.
Okay. So I think our work here is done. So we just need a motion to adjourn. Okay, John moves, all in favor? Appreciate the discussion.